kind of way, or any time they can just say Patriot Act or something?
No, this is all constitutional rights stuff, First Amendment rights stuff, and civil rights stuff.
Okay, so they can't just enforce or say we're working under the Patriot Act or anything like that?
I mean, again, they can always trump jurisdiction and say this is a federal blah, blah, blah. They can make anything up they want, but all of these rights still stand in the city of Philadelphia.
Okay, so the Patriot Act would be a federal activity?
Yes.
And not a...
Correct.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
Question. I heard you say several times that the police can make up anything that they want. Under what authority? I mean, I've heard people ask about asking police officers for their delegation of authority, like what authority are they working under, so that it be really clear what they're doing as opposed to, I don't know, just making up anything to incriminate, I guess, what's called Americans, the constitutionally protected Americans.
Are you talking about if they're undercover, if you're not clear as to what jurisdiction they're working under?
No, clearly badged officers with, police, 911, police, not undercover, just...
Why can they lie?
Oh, why can they lie? Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, what
So,
authority?
yeah, so they can lie because they are allowed to do whatever is in like the venue of their investigation to get information from someone who they consider a suspect. But you can't lie to them. I don't know if we actually said that. You can't lie to cops. It is illegal to lie to cops. So if you are going to, yeah, I know, it's real funny. If you are going to give a name, don't give a false name. If you are saying, I don't have my ID on me versus I don't want to give you my ID and they search you and find your ID, technically you lied to the cop. So you don't want to lie to cops, which is why we keep saying it's much better to keep quiet than to say anything, especially if you're going to lie. Do not lie to cops.
One thing we didn't mention about witnessing is that you can, if you're witnessing, you can say to the cop very loudly, stop. And you want to say it loud enough to be picked up on whatever recording device. So when it goes to trial, that there is, the audio of someone saying, stop doing that. Witnesses can say that. Those people who are being detained should be saying, am I being detained? Or I'm going to remain silent very loudly. Again, you want to practice these words at home. Say it really loudly. You can tell the police stop, the witnesses can say stop. Those who are being detained can say very loudly, I choose to remain silent, I don't consent to this search.
And if you're legally observing, cop watching, witnessing, you can also be stepping back and stepping away and say, I'm not doing anything wrong, officer. I am not interfering. I'm just videotaping, or I'm just legal observing. Like, legal observing is another word that cops all know. There are a bunch of lawsuits right now in the city of Philadelphia against the Philadelphia Police Department regarding cop watching and the repression of cop watching and legal observing. They know the word. You can say, I'm not interfering. If they say, well, then fine, I need to step back 5 more feet. As long as they're not trying to take stuff or obstruct you from seeing what's going on, again, might not be the worst idea to cooperate a little bit, as long as they're not obstructing your view of their interrogation.
I have one more question. Like, say if you're in Southwest and you have different districts, which is 18th district, 12th district, and let's just say something took place over in 12th district. Does 18th district have the right to come over and make that arrest and stand back in 12th district, not even though it's not in?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
What is the, when you say the witnesses can say stop and they're heard saying stop, what good is that going to do for the recording or for the person that's being interacted with?
So what kind of effect does that have when you're in court and the court's witnessing this tape and there's somebody saying stop very loudly to a cop who's beating somebody?
Okay, how many of you saw the videotape of Askia Sabor's beating? How many saw that? So Askia Sabor was the guy that was up in Parkside that got the crap beat out of him by the cop. Did you hear what people were yelling while that was happening? They were saying to Askia, stop fighting them. Stop fighting them, as those cops were beating the shit out of him. They were saying stop fighting them, right? What they should have been saying is, stop beating him. Stop hurting him. That's what you want to say. Stop. You want to say stop, obviously. When police are abusing someone, everybody here should be saying to them, stop abusing that person. Stop hurting that person. Right?
Now,
Just in terms of the other part of that question. No, go ahead.
No, I don't think we haven't completely answered it. So what happens with that tape and how do people use it?
So the other part of that question is that so now we're in court and the judge or the jury or whatever kind of proceeding it is listening to you say, I am not interfering, I am just cop watching, or I am just legal observing, whatever. And you are stepping back and you're stepping back. Video is one of the most tight forms of evidence when it comes to evidence, right? So if you are making it very clear on the video that you are A, witnessing police brutality, calling out police brutality, saying you're not interfering, it's these legal trigger words, these catch words, these magic words that you want to get on tape because it's automatically uploading, so now all that's on tape, you have it saved privately, and you can use that, right? The thing that Michiko was talking about when she was talking about that little top bracket of can this or can this not incriminate or hurt my friends? The thing with the Skia, it's debatable whether or not it was good that it went up as fast as it did. But what we try to encourage people to say is if it's possible to get consent from the person who's being brutalized, don't put anything up on the web unless you have gotten that person's information. Because like Jody was just saying, in a Skia's case, the cops having a video of a bunch of people saying stop resisting, stop fighting them wasn't great. In the end, it wound up being okay for lots of other reasons. But you want to make sure that you're not putting any information out there without somebody knowing it who's in an active investigation or case. And if you don't know what to do with that footage, let's say it happens all the time, right? You're walking down the street, cops are asking somebody, you just start videotaping, you don't know who they are. If they get arrested, you can ask them what their name is and who is a person that you want them to call. So you say, what is your name? They tell you your name, that's now on your video, you're far enough away, the cop's not snatching it from you, and then you also say, who can I call for you and what is their number? That you don't know who they are, you call this person, and you tell this person, get in touch with your local lawyer, get in touch with the PDA, the Public Defenders Association, get in touch with some lawyer, and let them know that your person just got beat up and arrested and da-da-da, right? Because you also want to make sure that that person doesn't get lost in the system, right? That they're not now bleeding out in a jail cell, which happens all the time, or have extensive internal bleeding or extensive damage and nobody knows where they're at for 24 or 48. Remember we said they can hold them at 48 hours. You can have a concussion, be bleeding in a cell for up to 48 hours and nobody knows where you are.
Before we go on, I just wanted to mention, because Jody didn't, she works for a lawyer by the name of Krasner, probably the best civil rights attorney in the city, and that law firm represented this black man, Skias Sabor, who was facing a long time in prison. Despite the evidence against him, allegedly, despite what all the cops said, he was found not guilty of all charges and finally released after several months, and that's because of Lawrence Krasner and Jody Dodd. So let's give him a big round of applause. Make sure you get her business card before she leaves.
So the last thing we're going to do is going to be kind of fun and kind of chaotic. We need 10 people. And and we're doing this in general, in case anybody engages in any kind of civil disobedience, activism, organizing while you're in the streets, but also we're doing this because we talked with Faye and Michael about the upcoming rapid response Ferguson solidarity actions that are be happening in Philadelphia at Broad and Cecil B. Moore and also City Hall and maybe a bunch of other places. Some of us are organizing with those people, some of us are in coalition with those people. So we want y'all to know what to do when you're in a protest situation or a civil disobedience situation when you're in the street. So we need 10 people to come up. 10 people, I'm not going to get them, just come on up.
By the way, we have until 9 o'clock.
Great.
10. We need 10 protesters.
So, grand jury decision just came down. Darren Wilson was found guilty.
Oh, yeah, you're going to be over there.
Darren Wilson was found not guilty because, police state racism. I'm sorry, this is not me. It didn't happen. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I should have said that. So the rapid response for Ferguson has just happened. Y'all and your crews are all heading to City Hall to go do solidarity for Ferguson. And of course, what happened? Are we going to 601 market? We're going to City Hall. Yeah, so we're at City Hall, which is public property, and there's about 600 bike cops and 3 paddy wagons and a bunch of undercover feds and a bunch of my favorite people ever, civil affairs cops. For those of you who don't know, are kind of like undercover cops, but they're not. They've got these orange bands on their arms. They're kind of like the friendly police that try and get information about your life. So everybody's protesting.
Don't shoot!
I'm upset.
The day after the verdict.
The day of
the verdict. As most of you know, they did that whole redo of City Hall, of Dilworth Plaza, right? Where they put the skating rink.
If it comes after 5 o'clock, the call is to go immediately.
Yeah. So, and they want to hold that space all night long. What we want you to know is you have the absolute legal right to be there. You have the absolute legal right to be there. That whole redo of Dilworth Plaza was done with all of our tax money. That's a public space. It's always been a public space. It's historically been a place for people to go and protest in Philadelphia. And that, so you have the right to be there. And what we wanted to just kind of like police can grab and grab. One of the things that we do as activists is like I grabbed the guy and I was beating the bejeebers out of him, and people were ignoring that. Like everybody should be like going over to when that happens, screaming, you know, police brutality. Stop, like police brutality for what happened. which happens in political action, like political protests a lot. You all saw the video from Ferguson about what was happening to people, right? There are ways that you can be in solidarity with each other, but we want you to know that you can publicly be out there. We believe that our motto is solidarity rocks. So I feel like everyone has to be together. And there is a divide and conquer. Who was doing civil affairs? Who was being nice?
I was.
Oh, Tia was trying to get information about people.
Does everybody know who the civil affairs cops are? Anyone not know civil affairs? So civil affairs cops are cops who are trained in doing intel. They walk around, they check on your crews, they ask how long you're going to be here, who's the leader of this action, who can I talk to, da-da-da, and they try and get information on you. They're like the friendly cops. They try and like make you believe that they're your friends. They dress in plain clothes. They're not undercover cops. They do have on these orange armbands, and
They can be helpful sometimes.
that's an opinion. Just kidding. They can be helpful sometimes, sure. And then the other cops that will be at protests are Philadelphia Police Department, right? What did you say?
Good cops and bad cops.
We got good cops and bad cops, yes. And then there are good judges and bad judges, exactly. So there'll be a bunch of different kinds of cops at political actions. And if you look at up here, and I think you all have copies of it, but there are some things that you can and can't do when you're out of political action. So not only just for Ferguson, but also if you, there's a lot of people in this room who are activists. If you know Michael, if you work with ATAC, you've probably done some actions, you've probably done some different kinds of convergences, right? And I'm sure there's a bunch of other activists in this room who do things with different organizations. You cannot carry drugs or weapons, regardless of if you have a license. If you're engaging in political activity and you are in the public and you have a gun on you, they're going to take you away. They're going to remove you from the scene. They might not necessarily arrest you if you have the license. They're not going to let you open carry in the protest. Engaging in property destruction, always illegal. Obstructing traffic on the sidewalks or the streets. So this is kind of like a funny one because there's a bunch of different tactics that people have come up with over the past couple of years to like avoid the obstructing charge, which is like movement, right? So if you're crossing back and forth across the street continuously, that is not obstructing. If you're walking in a space continuously, that is technically not obstructing. They will, again, still probably try and move you, but if you are moving, you are technically allowed to be doing that, right? Being in the street is a public place. Being on the sidewalk is a public place. As Jody said, being on Dilworth Plaza, which is not called that anymore, right? I don't know. Whatever it's called. Skate rink park. It's not, is public, right? Sorry, I'm talking way too much. I'm losing my voice. That's okay.
How about getting people ready?
Yeah.
Oh, right, sorry. So, is anybody planning on doing rapid response for Ferguson? Is anyone planning on going to City Hall? Okay.
He is.
So, we also do pieces of jail support. If you are going to an action, you should make sure you have jail support set up for your crew, which means make sure that you call our legal collective line, our arrest line, you find out what precinct they have gone to, and go there so that they have support when they come out. Because for anybody who's ever been arrested, it's a pretty horrible, demoralizing, cold, obnoxious, long process. And the greatest thing to happen when you walk out is to have a whole bunch of people hugging you and smiling you and giving you coffee and cigarettes and water and food. Right? I bet no one's ever had that happen when they come out of jail. But we try and do that, right? So jail solidarity means that, number one, you know that we, especially for Ferguson, this action coming up, we've already committed to it, but if there's any stuff that you're doing that you want our support with, we will not only be legal observing and cop watching, but we'll also be doing tracking. Which means that if you give us one of these pieces of paper with a whole bunch of information on it about your buddies that got arrested, we'll make sure we find out what precinct they're on, and we'll stay in touch with you so that you can know where to go. And for Ferguson and for anything that generally happens in City Hall, the two main precincts where people are taken to are 8th and Race, which is where everybody knows, a roundhouse, and 21st and Hamilton, which is the 9th district, 9th precinct, which is at 21st and Hamilton, like right behind the Whole Foods. What happened?
No, it's underground.
It's underground, right, yeah. So those are the two main precincts that people will probably be taken to. Jail solidarity is really, really important, like I just said, because, again, demoralizing, awful, cold, obnoxious, long process, right? In terms of activity, do you want to talk about the privilege of activity? Does anyone else besides me?
Piggyback on what you're saying. Even if you're going as a family to go to the protest and you're taking, you know, aunts, uncles, kids, fill out these forms for each other. And so it's just basic information. I don't even think it has, you know, email, just, you know, who to call if you're arrested is the most important thing. And if you do get arrested and none of your people are around, try to find a legal observer, tell them your name. Because if you have a form and we have the name, we can track you. So it's really important to don't lose your voice. It can be very scary. Yell your name. Make sure people know your name.
If you're being arrested at a
If you're being
protest.
arrested, yeah. And then we'll find, because we have this sheet, we can call around to the jails and find where you are.
Two other really important things to know if you're engaging in any kind of civil disobedience is that if you have any medical issues and if you have any medication on you, you want to make sure that you let the police know. Number one, you only want to bring as much as you're going to need for that next 24 to 48 hours. Right. So if you bring your bottle of medication, make sure it's got your name that matches your ID on it, because otherwise they'll confiscate it. And put at least 48 hours worth of medication in there, because if they take you into custody and you have like epilepsy, for example, you need to take your seizure medication. Right. So you want to make sure that you're letting your arresting officer know, and you also write down here, because we will also have medics on scene. We'll have street medics that will be on scene in case there's any harassment or brutality that occurs that does not end in arrest. Those medics can take care of those injuries. But in the event that there are arrests that take place that do have injuries, then there will be medics doing jail solidarity at both of these locations as well after the Ferguson solidarity action. But you want to make sure you let your arresting officer know, like, I have diabetes, I have epilepsy, I have bipolar disorder. Mental health meds are also really important to be aware of, right? Any life-sustaining medications, they are required by law. Again, unfortunately, doesn't mean they're going to do it, but they are required by law to administer to you if you have them, okay? So you want to make sure that if you're going to a protest, you don't have a knife on you, which, you know, sometimes people carry a knife in their back pocket, they forget to take it out. You don't have any kind of weapons on you, you don't have any kind of paraphernalia on you when you're in that space. Like Michiko said, even if you're not intending to get arrested, if you see a whole bunch of cops around, there's a possibility that you're going to get arrested. Since the people who are organizing the Ferguson action are meeting to hold space for a minimum of 24 hours, what's probably going to happen at some point, or may or may not happen at some point, is that they might take the street, they might be marching, they might be having vigils, they might be doing sit-downs. These things might happen. If they happen, sometimes the police in Philadelphia, and this has happened a bunch of times in terms of long-term protesting, will do what's called kettling, which means that if you are marching with somebody, and even there isn't necessarily something popping off, or there isn't any brutality going on, and the cops have just gotten bored of following you around the city, they're going to mark off the front and the back of that march, they're going to put up 2 fences, and they're going to arrest you all. So if you are somebody who like absolutely positively cannot get arrested, for example, if you're on an open case, if you have parole or probation open, and one of the things is that you cannot engage in any kind of illegal activity, which is most POs, you don't want to necessarily, you want to be as far away or be as unarrestable as possible, which is something we talk about.
People with certifications.
Right, people who have certifications, like nurses, teachers, any kind of professionals, people who are trying to get financial aid for school, for housing, for these things, or if you have your citizen status, if you're an undocumented person, if you are a person who has some type of mental health disorder where being in a small confined space for a long period of time is going to make you have like a psychotic break, right? Like just know yourself and know why it would be really unimportant for you to not get arrested. Right? Oh. Anybody else? Sorry, I'm the one who engages in the protest the most. You guys want to say anything else? I have 2 more things to say.
Go for it.
Yeah. So if you arrested for a demonstration, right? What is that considered, misdemeanor?
It can be. It depends on where you were arrested, what you were arrested for, and whether or not you resisted or assaulted a cop. But it just depends on what.
And just so you know, in Philadelphia in the last few years, they've actually gotten really smart. They've started charging people with summary offenses, which is the equivalent of a traffic citation for a protest. It was costing them a lot of money in civil suits when they were arresting people and putting them in jail.
Another thing we talk about is like diversity of tactics, but like solidarity of privilege. Which means if you are a person who isn't often targeted by the cops, so you're a white person, you're a white male, you're somebody who has like a lot of high standing in a community, whether it's
like you,
like me, right? I get targeted by the cops all the time. Strategy of privilege basically means like, yes, we want people to be able to engage in any kind of tactics that they want to raise awareness on a situation. But if you are, for example, a white person who is engaging in property destruction right next to a whole bunch of like crew that don't look like you, that don't know what you're doing, that's a really dumb idea. It's really disrespectful, and it is not being aware of your white privilege. Just saying, right? We're not saying there's anything wrong with that tactic. What we're saying is be aware of your surroundings, be aware of like the privilege you hold as engaging in this, and that your charges might not get as messed up as somebody else's would, and just be aware of your surroundings when you're engaging in any kind of activity that you don't have the consent from the other people around you on.
Okay, let's hear it for the ladies.
Yeah.
We have a few minutes for Q&A. Michael Porter's going to come down and join our awesome trainers. Has everyone gotten a copy of the survey? All righty. Please complete the survey form. And is everyone also signed in?
Yeah. I can ask questions. Shut up about what you did or didn't do. Remember that nothing you say will be used for you, but anything you say will be used against you. That's clear. There's a 7-question form they have here in Philadelphia that was taken from the Miranda decision. The Miranda decision is a Supreme Court case from back in 1966 where a Latino guy, Ernesto Miranda, was questioned about a rape. He spoke very little English, was primarily Spanish speaking. Long story short, he talked himself into a rape conviction. So after that, the court said, hold it. You got a Latino guy, doesn't really speak English, can't read Spanish. It was unfair for the cops to question him about that, but he didn't know anything. So it's about a 50-page Supreme Court decision, and what they did in Philly was to take that Supreme Court decision and boil it down to 7 questions on the form. And the second question on the form, and I can't tell you for the life of me why anybody would go beyond the second question. The second question says, do you understand that anything you say will be used against you? Now I'm the cop. I just arrested you, and I'm telling you, anything you say will be used against you. Why would you say anything? I just told you that's going to, in fact, it's actually illegal for the cops to tell you it would be used for you. They can only tell you against you. So remember that. And I also have here, I'm going to give you copies, and never consent to any searches, including car searches. By the way, some of you might know, in April of this year, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court pretty much turned Pennsylvania law on its head for over the last 200 years. It basically said that the cops needed a search warrant to search your vehicle. But in this April case, and it actually happened from a young black man several years ago from North Philly who was stopped by the police. Long story short, the law used to be that you needed a search warrant to search somebody's car. With this decision in April of this year, the Supreme Court said no more than. You don't need a search warrant. But as bad as it is that they ruled you don't need a search warrant, they still need probable cause. So basically what happened before April of 2014, the cop would have to stop the car, try to search it, you would say no, they would keep the car right there, run downtown, get a search warrant, and then come back and search it. After April of 2014, the cop on the street becomes the judge. He or she decides whether there's probable cause. And never went to law school, no disrespect, but you know, you got people who went to law school and then practiced law and became judges. They know a little bit about the law. But this guy here, Frank Rizzo's friend or whoever he is, knows nothing about the law, can barely read or write, and now this person's going to be the judge to determine it. So I want to be clear. Many people think that the cops can just search your car completely now in Philly and throughout Pennsylvania because of the decision. That's not true. They don't need a warrant, but they do need probable cause. So if they don't have it, don't give consent. That's the first thing I have here. Number 2, and we alluded to this, there is an app, I actually have it on my phone, an app that allows you to audio tape and videotape all encounters with police. It's an ACLU app, it's the New Jersey chapter, and the information is right here as to how to download that app, and you have to do it. And also part of number 2 is the phone number to reach our group, F the Police, and the Up Against the Law Legal Collective. That's all in item 2 on this one-page document. And finally, number 3, use the system to expose the system. Whenever you are victimized by the police, you should file the following. 1, a complaint with the Internal Affairs. We're not naive up here. We don't think that simply because you file the complaint that the cop's going to be fired tomorrow. He's not. She's not. But as Jody said, you're building up a record. So now it's not just Jamal from West Philly complaining, it's Raheem from South Philly, it's Joe from Germantown, it's Mary from wherever. So now that cop got 50 complaints in the last 30 days. That'll help you. That information here. The second thing, the Police Advisory Commission. Police Advisory Commission is a little better than Internal Affairs, but it's like a tiger with no teeth. So what can it do for you? And it doesn't have subpoena powers. So I can go to them and say, hey, Officer Johnson beat me up, I got it on videotape, what are you going to do? They'll schedule a hearing and tell Officer Johnson, we'd like you to come. He'll say, fuck you. And they say, okay. That's it. But at least Police Advisory Commission has a complaint against that cop from 5, 10, 15 people. So you build a record. And finally, one of the things that people really talk about is you can actually have a cop arrested for committing crimes. This is a very long story, but I'll cut to the chase. There's something called Rule 506 of the Pennsylvania Rules of Criminal Procedure. And what Rule 506 says is this. If you want to get a cop arrested for a crime against you, you can bypass the DA's office. You can bypass the police department and go right into a courtroom to argue that charges be filed against the cop. How do I know this? Back in 1998, October 1st, a young black man named Donta Dawson was driving in North Philly at 12th and Lehigh. He stops his car in the middle of 12th Street between Lehigh and Glenwood and just sits there. We find out later he's smoking angel dust, so he's in a catatonic state like a zombie just sitting in the car. So a police car drives by. In the passenger side is Officer Christopher D. Pasquale. In the driver's side is Officer Kirk Dodd. So when the car goes past, they notice the Donta Dawson just sitting there in the car. They stop the car. The black cop, the driver, Kirk Dodd, gets out the car, pulls out his gun, walks up to Donta Dawson's car, tries to engage him in conversation, no response. The black cop puts his gun back in his holster, walks back to the car where Officer D. Pasquale is. A minute or two passes. The black cop gets out of the car the second time, pulls out his gun, walks over to Donta Dawson, tries to engage him in conversation, no response. The black cop puts his gun back in his holster, reaches across the steering wheel, takes the keys out of the ignition, and walks back to the car. Police car. As he's walking back to the police car, the other cop, D. Pasquale, is leaning over the hood of the police car and fires 2 shots into the windshield of Donta Dawson's car. The first misses him, the second one hits him in the right eye, comes out of his left ear, killing him instantly. Long story short, DA Lynn Abraham, who's the DA at the time, is not filing charges against the cop. And after the black public primarily raised hell, she decided to file charges against the cop. But it was like a fixed fight, because instead of filing murder charges, and Jody and the other lawyers here could tell you, murder basically means that if you use a deadly weapon on a vital body part of another human being, that's malice. So the homicide becomes a murder, not a manslaughter. The difference between murder and manslaughter is what we lawyers call malice. So with murder, you essentially tried to kill. In murder and manslaughter, maybe not. It gets complicated. The bottom line is this. The DA knew that. So after the black community raised hell, she relented and filed charges against Officer D. Pasquale, but manslaughter, not murder. And the judge who gets the case says, this is not manslaughter, I'm throwing it out. And now the DA refiles with another judge, same charges, knowing that the fix was in, that both judges by law had to throw the case out. So now DA Lynn Abraham is able to say, I did my job as the prosecutor, don't blame me, blame these 2 judges. By the way, she's running for mayor. So anyway, long story short, so I'm like furious, because I was born and raised in North Philly, 23 years, and I'm like, Donta Dawson could have been my brother or my son or my cousin. Something has to be done. So I'm looking at the law, because I always tell people I am not a lawyer who happens to be a black man. Instead, I'm a black man who just happens to be a lawyer. So now I'm trying to figure out a way, how can I get these racist bastards who murdered Donta Dawson? Last time I checked, sitting in your car in the middle of a highway is a misdemeanor offense, and you don't get the death penalty for it. But that's what Donta Dawson got, the death penalty. So I'm trying to figure out what we can do, and I'm looking at this private criminal complaint law, and I understand that's primarily designed so that if there's a nuisance case, a kid living next door to you, throwing up a ball against your window, and you call the cops and say, hey, this kid's going to break my window, the cops will say, we don't have time for that. Go downtown and file a private criminal complaint. But if you look at the statute, it doesn't say it's limited to minor nuisance cases. It says that if there's a case that you want to take straight to a court, you can. So along with Leon Williams, another attorney in the city, we filed a private criminal complaint and made history. On April the 6th, year 2000, we got a judge here in Philadelphia for the first time in Philadelphia history, for the first time in Pennsylvania history, and as far as we know, maybe the first time in American history, on April 6th, year 2000, to grant our private criminal complaint and hold D. Pasquale on murder charges. That had never been done before. So what does DA Lynn Abraham do? She goes outside of her office and hires probably the best lawyer in Pennsylvania history, Dick Sprague. So your tax dollars goes to DA to pay DAs to prosecute cases, but what she does is go outside of her office, hire Dick Sprague to represent them, and think about it. Now the DA has become a defense attorney. Isn't her job to prosecute, not to defend? Long story short, the Pennsylvania Superior Court, Supreme Court reversed. And they said, no, the judge who held this cop on murder was wrong, and now what we're going to do is to reverse that, and D. Pasquale's not going to face the charges. Long story short, because I got to wrap this up in the next few seconds, the law now is that you can still go after cops to charge them with crimes, but misdemeanors only, no felonies. But it's still a start. So when they slap you, when they punch you, when they kick you, at least you can get simple assault. At least you can get reckless endangerment. At least you can get conspiracy. What you want to do is to use the system and take from it whatever you can. We would love to be able to get murder like we did in 2000, but the appellate courts changed that. But you can still charge a cop with a misdemeanor. I appreciate when we go after cops through internal affairs and police advisory commission, but that doesn't penalize the cop enough. If I go to work and punch the hell out of my coworker, I have more to worry about than just getting fired. I got to worry about getting arrested. So if a cop kicks and punches the hell out of somebody, he or she should have more to fear than simply getting fired. They should face criminal charges. We can sue cops all day long and get million-dollar verdicts for wrongful death and brutality, but the cop doesn't pay that verdict. You, the taxpayers, pay. So what I want is the cop personally to pay. And that means now you got a misdemeanor conviction, you could go to jail or whatever. All that information is here. And finally, there were several things mentioned tonight that were right on point, and I've never been to an Up Against the Law legal collective workshop. This is the first time, and I'm thoroughly impressed. Early on, Jody, Dodd pointed out, because there were really good questions from you all about what can people do when the cop does this and the cop does that. And at a certain point, you probably felt that, what the hell, since the cops can do anything? And the answer is they can. But as Jody said, you may beat the rat, but you can't beat the ride. Let me repeat that. You may beat the rat, but you can't beat the ride. What does that mean? The cops can do everything. So if they want to beat you up and charge you with a crime and then arrest you and take you downtown, that's the ride you can't beat. But if you know your rights, when the case gets to trial, now you beat the rat. So you got to concede going in. People ask me, what's the law and why is it so unfair? I tell them, the law is what the man with the gun says it is. It's as simple as that. You can talk about all these highfalutin legal theories, none of that matters. If the cop has the gun, then that's the law right there. You might not like it, so you got to figure out, what can I do to mitigate or lessen my losses? I already got one loss, I'm getting arrested, I got beat down, and I'm going to be taken downtown. You can't do anything about that. But what you can do is to make sure that you don't worsen that by talking yourself into trouble. The criminal cases I handle are primarily murder cases. And in the murder cases I have, I'm shocked to tell you that about 75 to 80% of them involve my clients talking to the police. I'm like, why are you even talking? Back in the day, up in the 70s and early 80s, the cops could beat the slop out of you. And don't get me wrong, they can still do it now, but they're not doing it as much because now, as of the 80s and 90s and 2000s, somebody in the system will see you shortly after you get arrested. So you get arrested today, a public defender is going to see you. A bail commission is going to see you. That's new. In the 70s and 80s, they could beat the slop out of you, hold you in some police station basement for about a week or so, and nobody sees it. Now your swollen lip goes down, your busted eye goes down. So my point is the cops are not beating you up as much. They do it, but not as much to get confessions. I tell my young clients, if they're not beating the shit out of you and torturing you, why the fuck are you talking? I don't understand that. I mean, if they beat me enough, I'll confess anything, but just yelling at me and screaming, that's not going to get me to talk myself into a 5-year, 10-year jail sentence. Bottom line is, shut up, as Jody mentioned. Some other stuff I wanted to mention, but it's not relevant. Make sure you get a copy here, and please, reach out to the Up Against the Law Legal Collective because they're doing great work and they're arming you with the information you need. Let's give them another round of applause.